All right, Shalom. All right, let me get straight into this lesson. But America was built on racism and slavery. That's how America got to what it is. That's why you have these big mega corporations, these sprawling cities, these sprawling mansions, right? You had these cities like Miami, Chicago, New York, Dallas, LA, and the list goes on. But it was built on slavery, and all your so-called founding fathers owned slaves. George Washington owned 350 slaves. Andrew Jackson owned 200 slaves. Thomas Jefferson, 200 slaves. You could screenshot this and the list goes on. So let me get into this lesson. But you so-called white people, you fly your American flag and you so proud, right? Proud to be an American. And they go to show you the spirit of you devils, right? Because you come in that proud spirit, right? So this is something that's called obvious racism, right? But how it's done today, they control the whole system. It's done in a way it's systematic. You can't see it, right? But it's everywhere you look. Look at the real estate. Look at the wealth transfer, right? Look at who own the big businesses, the big corporations that you go work at. All this go back to so-called white people, right? Look at the credit system. Look at the banking system. Look at the home loans, right? Look at the car loan. All this is facilitated by the so-called white man because you was integrated in a system that was already set up by the so-called white man to oppress you, right? 1 second. All right, so let me get into this definition. Give me 1 second. 1 second. I think I'm opening up with this first scripture. So this is the book of Zechariah 11 and 5. Right, the book of Zechariah 11 and 5. It says, who possesses slay them at the very top and hold themselves not guilty. So that's the coming, you know what I'm saying, that you so-called white people say it wasn't me. But hold up, you get the benefit, you accessory to a crime, right? You know that all this was got by ill games, right? Rape, robbery, and pillaging, stolen property, stolen heritage, right? Stolen everything, right? But you won't give it back though. But you continue to benefit and you get to live a comfortable life, seeing your kids, you know, how your kids live a good life while we suffer, right? So that's holding you accountable, right? It says, who possesses slay them and hold themselves not guilty. It wasn't me, right? They'll say, I didn't own any slaves, right? But they continue to benefit off what their ancestors did, right? It says, and they that sell them say, blessed be the Lord God, right? Because your God is God in Jesus. That's who you exalt. You don't exalt Yahweh and Yahweh Shah. That name is foreign to you people, especially you Edomites. You got your own gods. So you took our Bible, you hijacked the Bible like you steal everything. It made it your book. This is not your book, right? This is not your God. The religion of Christianity and the truth of the Bible is two separate things. This is our book. It says, for I am rich, and they own shepherds, pity them not. So your Al Sharp tongue, right? Your Reverend so-called Jackson, right? Your MLKs, right? Have sold our people out. They have led our people astray. So let's go here. Let's go into some of these things that you don't want to talk about, right? So you get to control everything, live a comfortable life, right? Don't have the cares of this world that we have. And you think you're going to ride out in the sunset with your white Jesus. That's not going to happen, right? And the character that you created as so-called Jesus is a so-called black man. And that's something that you so-called white people don't want to face. That's the truth, though. And it's named not Jesus. It says right here, and this is this book. I had went into this book a while back, how so-called white folks got so rich. And it's some of the things that you've done that's currently done to this very day, right? That's how you got your wealth and able to pass all this stolen property and land and resources down generationally, right? That's why you go to these so-called affluent neighborhoods, right? And it's in every city. You got the so-called white people part of town, and you got the so-called blacks and Hispanic part of town. You go to the so-called white people part of town, it's the best homes, the mansions, it's a total different vibe, right? It says right here, the Indian land grab. So you stole all this land, right? That you continue to get the benefit off that and pass that land down generationally. Wealth is land. That's how you actually accumulate wealth, by having land, right? Slavery, the most profitable business of all time. See, people don't get it. Slavery literally built this country. That's why you have these sprawling cities like Miami, Chicago, New York, right? You got Dallas, LA. They're just a few cities, right? And the North benefited off the slavery as well. They worked hand in hand with the South, right? So this whole country was built on slavery, and it was the most profitable business of all time. You got free land that you stole. You got to use the land, the resources on this land for free because you stole that as well. And you got northern, Native American, so-called Native American brothers, which would be Gad and Reuben, and the other tribes to use them to work the lands, and also the so-called blacks, right? It says sugar to cotton to oil. It says Jim Crow laws, more money for us. So that's a whole different kind of slavery with the Jim Crow era. We still currently in the Jim Crow era. It's just hidden, right? It's done in these systems. It's systematic. It says new slavery, sharecropping, and predatory lending. So that's something that you devils did, right? You did sharecropping with your ancestors, and you are your ancestors back, right? Sharecropping, where these jakes that so-called was free, which they never was free. They were just transferred from private to public ownership, from these private plantation owners to the government. That's what emancipate means, to transfer of property, right? And they got tricked into another form of slavery. And you got a lot of these jakes, they in prison for the crimes that they didn't commit, right? It gets deep. It says religious racism. That's what's pushed in all your different denominations of Christianity, whether it be Methodist, Catholic, Baptist, right? Seventh-day Adventist. It's all pushing this image of so-called white supremacy, right? And you push that lie that so-called black people is Hamites, and it's the curse of Ham with the dark skin. You the devil, right? It says white, so-called white domestic terrorism, right? Let's go down the list. Sundown towns, right? So you had these towns that Jake to this very day cannot be in when the sun go down and something bad might happen to them, right? Homestead Act, the land is our land. So they actually had something that these so-called white people was getting land for free, or they'll put $1 down, right, to get the land that they stole from the Native Americans. And that same land is passed down to these very so-called white people we see today, right? That's how they got some called generational wealth. It's built on our backs. Salakia. It says farmers home administration for so-called whites only, for so-called white farmers only. Salakia. All right, public housing, the projects. It says social security and pension for so-called white workers only. So that was actually done, that built that wealth for the so-called white people today. It says unemployment insurance for so-called whites only. It says minimum wage law for so-called whites only. It says home owners loan corporation. Right, so they had actually conspired to do this as well, that they wouldn't get loans to Jakes and that was moving in certain areas. They would redline them, right? That's why you got a lot of these cities that set up the so-called white people on one side, which would be the better neighborhoods, have more home wealth value, more appraisal value, and the so-called black side will have less, value, and it'll be ran down. It says racial profiling in the housing market. So yeah, that's just how I explained to you. It says veteran administration mortgages for so-called whites only. It says federal housing administration. They even had some with the FHA loan, right, that they wouldn't give loans to so-called blacks. That happened for a long time, man, right? And that's how the so-called white people was able to build so much wealth as well. So you done all these things, man, to keep us down. It says the black tax. Let's keep going. It says GI Bill for so-called white veteran programs. All right. It says corporate welfare. It says false flag operations. It says healthcare, a sick care industry. So they pump you all this bad food so you can go on dialysis. You can be on these pharmaceutical medications with high blood pressure, hypertension, right? All these diseases because they pump poison to our people with the McDonald's, the Wendy's, right? The ramen noodles. You go down the list, man. These hot Cheetos, Takis. All right. It says police power keeps so-called blacks in their place. So that's another whole entity, right? The prison industry. So they use this prison industry, right, to lock up Jake, right, to give him unfair trials and, you know, falsely accuse him of things, and they go out to do this time so they can work for the prison industrial complex, right, where they go manufacture furniture and all these different products that we use on a daily basis for these big corporations, right? It says Hollywood and racial propaganda. So they use Hollywood to push this so-called white superiority narrative. When they see these when you see these movies, you know, all like the Ten Commandments, all these biblical peace movies, right? Period peace movies. They all so-called white people. But in actuality, they really supposed to be so-called black people. So it's all propaganda, right? It says the good old boy network. So that was something I heard even growing up, that the so-called white man will have these industries sealed off from you so-called blacks, Hispanic, and Native Americans. Good old boy network, right? Government sabotage, FBI, COINTELPRO, when they put so-called drugs in our community, right? Man, it goes on and on. There's so much stuff. It's like it'll take a lifetime to go into. So let's go here. I want to get into these two things before I run out of time. I want to get into the systematic racism. What is it? It says systemic racism refers to the discrimination policies and practices baked into society and institutions, including government agency and the criminal justice system, right? So this stuff is interwoven inside this country, all right? And it's deep, right? So you got these government institutions, right, even to this very day, that discriminate against Jake, to keep Jake into these systems, right? The welfare system was, you know, is set up to, you know, for you Jakes to keep you down, man, to keep you dependent on the system, right? And the criminal justice system is, man, it's something that you can't comprehend. Let's go here. Covert. What is covert racism? So that's something that you can't necessarily see, but it's everywhere. You look at on these, just look at the NFL. Most of these players are Jakes, right? But you don't have not one so-called black owner, right? They all Edomites run these football organizations and so on and so forth. It says covert racism is a form of racial discrimination that is disguised and subtle. You hear this? Rather than public or obvious, like I was showing you here, right? Let me go back to this. 1 second. Let me let this load. All right. This is obvious, right? Colored and so-called white. This is a new form, new way they do it, right? It says rather than public or obvious, it says concealed in the fabric of society. Covert racism discriminates against individuals through often invasive and seemingly passive methods. Covert racially based decisions are often hidden or rationalized with the explanation that society is more willing to accept. So they'll water it down to make it not sound as bad. But they're discriminating on you in every way. But you don't see it because most of our people monkey minded. They naive. These racial biases cause a variety of problems that work to empower the suppressors while diminishing the rights and powers of the oppressed. You hear this? Covert racism often works subliminally. Let me see. And much of the discrimination is done subconsciously. You hear this? So it's done in these people's mind. When we tell them that the Israelites were so-called black people, these Edomites in their mind say, hell no, I refuse to believe that. Y'all a bunch of, you know, insignificant people to them. You know what I'm saying? That's how they look at you, right? But I want to get into some more stuff. I'm just not going to have enough time. All right. Hopefully this lesson was edifying. Call Hala Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shah, Ba'ashem, Rakak, Kodash. Shalom.